Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Ion Africa. My name is Awasar. I'm Assistant Director for Academic Affairs at the African Studies Center at Michigan State University. Ion Africa is our weekly seminary series, and I'm very delighted today to have Dr. Ousmane Sangho, as our guest. Before we start, a brief introduction. Dr. Ousmane Sangho is an associate professor of African Literature and Civilization at the Université des Lettres et des Sciences Humaines de Bamako in Mali. He is also the secretary of the National Commission for the Advancement of Lecturers and Researchers. Currently, Dr. Sangho is a Fulbright visiting scholar at Michigan State University's African Studies Center. He holds a PhD in English education from Ghana and a Master of Art in Education from Russia. On that account, he speaks 5 languages: Songhay, Bambara, French, English, and Russian. Thank you very much for being here, Dr. Sangho. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Awa, for your brief presentation. And nice to meet you here today, not in the Office of African Studies Center. So thank you, Mr. Leo, my director. Thank you, Isaac, and thank you also, Madam, for attending this talk. So the title of my topic is Developing Research in Africana Studies in Francophone African Universities. So the word Africana should not be confused with African. African is continental, whereas Africana unites. It includes Africa, African American, and Caribbean studies. All together, all taken together is Africana. Then background to the study. Africana is an interdisciplinary field. As I already said, it covers African, African American, and Caribbean, so that all of them will be probed in the same historical and contemporary context. Because if we see African American, it derived from transatlantic slave trade, and Caribbean also derived from the emancipation of the enslaved Black Americans. Slave trade and colonization, they left very indelible traces on African indigenous cultures. They are the basis of many post-colonial conflicts between Africa and its diaspora. My main interest in trying to reconcile African, African American, and Caribbean is my conviction of their complementarity. They are from different locations, but they have comparable features. African studies sustain organization in the division of African countries without taking into account the culture of the populations. And African American studies survived depersonalization of forced migration of slavery. And Caribbean studies, they also endured the uncertainties of migration. And what reinforced my commitment is an international colloquium that was held in Benin, Ouida, Le Mans, organized by Abomey Calavi and Le Mans University. And this colloquium was entitled Memories of Slavery in Literature, Art, and Museum. And I presented a communication during this colloquium, and my communication was entitled The Repercussion and Effects of Slave Uprooting as depicted in Maryse Condé's Ségou. Maryse Condé is from Guadeloupe. She found her roots in Mali, and she wrote a book entitled Ségou, where she delved back a long way into her Bambara family history to make a historical reconstitution in the form of a novel. And my presentation at that colloquium tackled the issue of identity fading. And at times, the debates were too stormy between scholars from America, Europe, and Africa, that some issues, including the relationship between African American, African Caribbean, and Africa, required further studies to elucidate questionings about space, place, and identity. It is this way the need to delve into the issue through the Africana Library Resources in the United States of America arose. And the Fulbright Visiting Scholar Program and MSU African Studies Center offered me this opportunity to equip myself with theoretical, epistemological, and critical tools, designing, implementing Africana-centered curriculum. And this cultural immersion will also help make a circle of acquaintances among scholars from reciprocal contribution. And as Associate Professor of African Literatures and Civilization, my 20-year experience of teaching is at the disposal in terms of lectures, round tables, colloquium, and other community service. My courses in Mali mainly focus on African Francophone and Anglophone authors, continental authors, and also authors of African descent, including African American and Caribbean. And the genres we explore are novel, essay, drama, and poetry. And the text analysis is the main concern of students: setting and structure, subject matter, character and characterization, plot development, themes, style, figures of speech, literary devices, and concepts and theories. As for civilization, mainly West African empires such as Ghana, Mali, and Songhay are studied. Ancient Egypt, apartheid, and current African issues are also contextualized, illustrated, interpreted, and discussed. So at the English statement of the problem now, at the English department of my university, the disciplines in literature and civilization are only limited to 3: African studies, British studies, and American studies globally. So that authors such as William Du Bois, Chancellor William, Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, so they do not cope exactly with those studies. Consequently, they are studied in both African studies and American studies because they are both of them at the same time. Although they are neither quite suitable for the first, African, nor for the second, American. Pediwell, James Abner Pediwell is a great expert in curriculum development. He said, in order to determine what our university curriculum should be, we must first decide what our society should be. What we need to do is to give our youth more thorough grounding in the fundamentals. The great cultural verities are eternal, changeless, a certain indefinable something whose essence is timelessness. Another problem is that because of the language barrier, because Mali is a Francophone country, there is very little collaboration between African Francophone scholars and their African American counterparts, which influenced negatively on the development of the Africana studies in the Francophone countries. The purpose of this study is globally to foster a sustainable research in Africana studies that may lead to the creation of Africana studies as a separate discipline in my university in Bamako and in other Francophone universities. Specifically, this study aims to explore and discuss the main theorists, critics, and intellectuals who tackled the issue of Africana studies. A revival and increased interest in Africana studies can bridge the distance between scholars from Francophone Africa and the American counterpart, while opening up a dialogue on issues of African tradition, slavery, colonization, and migration. Theoretical frameworks, because there are many. Beyond the reception theory, we tackle the reception theory globally, the general principles, but the main focus will be done with reader response criticism, because sometimes people, they confuse those theories, the reception theory and the reader response criticism. The foundation of reception theory rests on the general trend of readership over the course of time, while reader response criticism is the response of a single reader. And what is the criticism here? The formal study, evaluation, discussion, and interpretation of authors' literary works and their texts by showing the various issues. And the main theoretical framework upon which this study is built is the concept Africana. We have many concepts of Africana, but that concept of Africana as viewed by Molefi Kete Asante in his contemporary critical thought in Africology and Africana studies. In the course of this presentation, I will introduce you who is Asante's Africana studies encompasses such disciplines as African studies. What does it mean? Studies from the continents. African diasporan studies. Africans who choose to go abroad, their studies. African American studies. Africans enslaved in America. It means African Americans. So this is also a kind of diaspora, but a forced displacement. Then Afro-American studies are Africans who are naturalized here in America. Afro-Asian studies, naturalized in Asia. Afro-European, Afro-Islamic studies, Afro-Jewish, Afro-Latino, Afro-Native American studies, Indians from the Native American, Caribbean studies, Pan-African studies, Black British studies, and to sum up everything, we just say Black studies or Black consciousness is one of the earliest models for cross-cultural studies. It concerns people who were affected by colonization, African people who had been transported, enslaved, or otherwise made diasporic by colonialism and by slavery. That is Ashcroft. And it developed in the 19th century through the writings of Douglass, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Du Bois, and through the works of Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican who settled in the United States. Another issue is the post-colonial concepts of diaspora and deracinate that are also explored in this paper. Diaspora in the meaning as a forced displacement of peoples from their native lands, and deracinate as those who are uprooted from their native or social environments. Ashcroft said the European slave trade and plantation slavery not only uprooted Africans from their home environment, but it alienated them, those enslaved Africans, from their own racial characteristics to the extent that they deny themselves. So they have reached this level of self-denial. explored. When Asante he wrote Decolonize the Universities in Africa, he said, I have not yet seen an African university. He visited Kenya, Zimbabwe, and many African countries, 16 African countries, Senegal. There are numerous universities where the teachers and students are Africans, but the curricula are European. And that is a theoretical framework, miseducation. Comprador is also a concept coined by Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon is from Martinique, and he said, so comprador is that Black intellectual who denies his own people to the benefit of the invaders, thinking that he is civilized, you see. And Fanon said the black skin of these compradors is marked by their complicity with the values of the white colonial powers. And the true Africana intelligentsia should deconstruct wrong preconceived ideas by teaching the society on the firm foundation of the people and their values. My methodology, I apply qualitative approach insofar as everything I do is interpretation. So, and the design of my study is content analysis. I'm not going to do a field study. So I will explore documents, articles, essays, building romance and criticism, so that to illustrate them, contextualize them, interpret and discuss. Such authors, there are many of them, but I just took some of them to present here. Molefi Kete Asante, who is African American, despite the name. Paul Tiambe Zeleza is from Malawi. Hampateba is from Mali. Cheikh Anta Diop, Senegal. Frantz Fanon, Martinique. Aimé Césaire, Martinique. Paris Condé, Guadeloupe. Youssouf Tata Cissé from Mali is a great scientist. Wakami Soko is a griot from Mali. Solomana Kante is the designer of the Nko writing. Nko, it is a script in West Africa. Jibril Tamsirnyar from Guinea. Magan Keita, an African American, but his name is Magan Keita. Tony Cade Bambara, African American. Ngugi Wachongo from Kenya. Rayland Rabaka from America. Clyde Ledbetter, African American. Amilcar Cabral from Bissau, Guinea. Mwalimu Shuja from Kenya. Ibekwe Chinwezu, Jemi Ouchekwa, and Madubuke. Those are Nigerians. They are called the trio. They wrote a very popular book entitled Decolonizing African Literature. And Julius Nyerere, the Mwalimu from Tanzania, the designer of the Ujamaa, the African socialism. Kwame Nkrumah, the Osagefo from Ghana, who is called the Osagefo because he's called the Redeemer from Ghana. He is a Pan-Africanist. Modibo Keita from Mali. Ali Mazrui from Kenya. Malcolm X, Chancellor William and Du Bois. So though there are many of them, but just to show you some of them. The significance of this study, because African studies is relatively a new discipline in many Francophone African countries. I say a new discipline because I did not want to be categoric, but I myself, I do not know a Francophone country, a Francophone university where Africana studies are explored, are a major. but they exist in Ghana, they exist in Nigeria, they exist in Kenya, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, in almost all Anglophone countries, but it does not exist in Francophone ones. It is hoped that scholars in Francophone African countries can enrich the Africana studies by bringing their own insights, knowledge, and experience from an African-centered perspective. And this attitude of cultural immersion may be conducive to reconnect Africa to the diaspora while reinforcing the ties between Malian universities and Africana studies departments in the world. Now, who is Molefi Asante? At first glance, the name Molefi Asante, Kete Asante, may mislead us because of its African sonority. But Asante was born Arthur Lee Smith Jr. in 1942 in Valdosta, Georgia, United States. He is an African-American professor in the Department of Africology at Temple University, Philadelphia, where he founded the PhD program in African-American Studies. He is a leading figure in the fields of African-American Studies, African Studies, and Communication Studies. He is the author of more than 66 books and the founding editor of the Journal of Black Studies. This is what he stated. He said, most African people in America, he does not consider himself as an African American. He considers himself as an African in America. So African people in America have the names of slave owners: Washington, William Lincoln, Johnson, Jefferson, are not African names. They are the names of our European oppressors. I hated these names. They meant nothing to my history but oppression, shame, domination, defeat, and depression. I put it in red because I teach literature. So it is an ascending gradation. From oppression up to depression, it is the figure of still here is amplification. It is amplified. The slave raiders, how they are depersonalized from their itinerary, from one slave owner to another, each one calling him different names. And we see here the dedication of the slave raiders to eliminate all traces of slaves' ancestry. Thus, they intend to forestall any potential amalgamation or family gathering of the diaspora. That is why in 1976, Asante chose to make a legal name change because he considered Arthur Lee Smith as a slave name. And the event that definitely motivated him is confessed in one of his articles when he visited Ghana in 1972. And when he visited the library of the University of Legon, he asked the librarian whether my book, The Rhetoric of Black Revolution, had reached the campus. And the librarian replied, yes, but I thought the author, Arthur Smith, was an Englishman. And he could not understand how a person with an African phenotype could have an English name. Unfortunately, it exists. It exists everywhere in Africa, whether Francophone Africa or Anglophone Africa. It was a profound encounter for an African American. And I vowed then and there that I would change my name. Soon after, I took the Soto name Molefi, which means one who gives and keeps the traditions. This is the meaning of the name he chose. And the last name, Asante, from the Twi language. Now we start to develop to make the literature review of the list of the critics I gave you in the methodology. So Paul Tiambe Zeleza is from Malawi. In his essay, Building Intellectual Bridges from African Studies and African American Studies to Africana Studies in the United States, he tried to explain the ambiguity in the relationship, because when we speak of reconciling, it means there is separation. So he tried to explain this separation between African intellectual migrants in the United States and African American. And what he thinks, he said, as migrants from predominantly Black societies, African migrant intellectuals were not always sensitive to the racial dynamics and demands of American society and the academy. Some even internalized the dominant society's negative stereotypes of African Americans, which often made them accomplices with European Americans in America's eternal racial war, for which they were sometimes rewarded with preferential hiring and promotion over African Americans. This is the approach of Tiambe Zeleza. He thinks that Americans, white Americans, they respect more Africans than Americans. And for that, this feeling also, some Africans are taken in that trap. They reject their African American brothers here. In the same vein, Asante was intrigued in one of his writings. I forgot the title. He said he was intrigued that white Americans had respect for African American. So he illustrated a where he himself, Asante, when he was at the college, with one of his friends who was white, they went to a restaurant eating. And when the waiters came, they told Asante that Black people are not served here. It was before the abolition of racism. And the friend, the white friend of Asante replied that this one is not a Negro, he is from Africa. His name is Abubakar. And then they presented excuse. They said, oh, we thought that it was a Negro. You see, this is how Asante illustrates this event. And he said he was intrigued that white Americans had respect for Africans from the continent that they did not have for African Americans. And to the contrary, he found that many African Americans have little appreciation also for Africans. Many African Americans, they have little appreciation for Africans and also little knowledge of Africa. They don't know Africa. At first sight, the image that a continental African who has just landed in the United States has most of his Black American brothers hardly looks bright. Ultimately, it conveys a feeling of outrage at their behavior that seems odd and strange because of their easily bearing and deportment. Consequently, many Africans fall in the trap of stigmatizing African Americans with negative stereotypes, as Asante said. Another issue is the apparent distrustful attitude, because African Americans, they do not trust Africans. They have a distrustful attitude toward many toward Africans. We feel like they are angry with us without knowing the motives of this distancing and reclusion. Many times, my wife is here, she does not speak English. And when we take Uber, and when we coincide with an African American driver, so he never was. You see, she realized other drivers, whether from or from IT or from we exchange, they are familiar. But African American, so they take a distance. Good. To that effect, Asante, in his speech address to the Guadeloupean scholars, he observed that the only people who have totally distanced themselves from their cultural origin are Africans in the diaspora. We have been victimized, we means African Americans, by the negative image of Africa, and have therefore concluded that we wanted nothing to do with Africa. It is the voice of the person who says, I am not an African. I never left anything in Africa. To such a question, Malcolm X replied in 1960, you left your mind in Africa. Do not think you have not left anything in Africa. A contradiction between history and perspective produces a kind of incongruity, which is called decentredness. You don't know where you are from and you don't know where you are going. And it is this decentredness that constitutes the cultural gap between Africa and its diaspora that this study seeks to reduce, in spite of the great ongoing campaign of propagation of a negative image of Africa. And this disinformation campaign is launched not only by Europeans, Westerners, the Eurocentrist Westerners, but also by Africans, African Americans and African Caribbean, who are so successfully subjugated that they act in lieu of their masters. Those people, Frantz Fanon calls them comprador. Yes, and this attitude of herd instinct is miserably described by Malcolm X as the slave mentality. Usually those auto-disparagers aspire to globalization. It is a Western concept. It is the alleged process of the world becoming a single place. But if we look at it, we take lenses and try to see what is globalization. In effect, it neither does this, neither does this Western concept influence in the same way, to the same degree, nor equally beneficial to different communities. Globalization has often perpetuated poverty, widened material inequalities, increased ecological degradation, sustained militarism, fragmented communities, marginalized subordinated people, fed intolerance and deepened crises of democracy. It has maybe some advantages, but it has also disadvantages, inconveniences. According to Shuja Mwalimu, this state of mind is the resultant of what? Too much schooling, but too little education. We are too much schooled, but little educated, a paradox of Black life in white societies. To that effect, he supports that a strategic differentiation between education and schooling is fundamental to the transmission, maintenance, and development of an African-centered cultural orientation and identity. His essay entitled Education and Schooling, you can have one without the other. That is true. You can be educated, you can be schooled, but not educated. And in the Bambara saying, they say, Kalani kodon tekele. What does it mean? Education and consciousness are not the same. Meaning that a person can be highly schooled and still be fooled if he or she has no groundings in the fundamentals. One of the aspects of resorting to the fundamentals is widely explored by Clyde Ledbetter Jr. Clyde is a co-author in critical thought on Africology and African studies. He is the co-author. He explored in his essay human rights studies as a subfield of Africology. He suggests that Africans and the people from African descent, those they do not use African American or Caribbean, they say Africa and African descent. So should familiarize with early African documents, such as the Charter of the Mali Empire, one of the oldest constitutions in the world. This charter is known as the Mandé Charter or the Kurukanfuga Charter. It was proclaimed in the 13th century by Emperor Sundiata Keita. Despite the propagandist disparaging campaign of Eurocentric scholars, in 2009, UNESCO inscribed this charter on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And this is what UNESCO states. The charter, one of the oldest constitutions in the world, albeit mainly in oral form, contains a preamble of 7 chapters advocating social peace, education, abolition of slavery, freedom of expression. And it is still transmitted orally from father to son, still in a codified way within the Malanke clans. To keep the tradition alive, commemorative annual ceremonies of the historic assembly are organized in the village of Kangaba, adjacent to the vast clearing of Kurukanfuga, which now lies in Mali. And Ledbetter notes that the significance of this charter is that it establishes an African conception of human rights that predates both the Magna Carta of England and the Déclaration des droits de l'homme, the Declaration of the Rights of Man of France. It appears that Ledbetter Jr. serves of narrow-minded Eurocentric scholars who consider this statement as an offense to the alleged civilizational primacy of Europe. It is this determination of some scholars to destroy African civilization that motivated me. I wrote about this issue to write the exhibition of disdain in the writings of authors with stubborn Eurocentrism against the Charter of Kurukanfuga. So those references, it was published in France by Lamartin, and the references are here. This obvious Eurocentrism among these devious and sleazy intellectuals is motivated by a determination to reject orality. For them, this is not a constitution because it was not written. It was taken from orally. Post-colonial cultural studies have led to a general re-evaluation of the importance of orality and oral cultures, a recognition that the dominance of the written in the construction of ideas of civilization is itself a partial view of more complex cultural practices. Amadou Hampateba relates the words of his spiritual master, Chernobokar, who does not write. For this purpose, he makes a clear distinction between writing and knowledge. It is not because something is written that it is knowledge. So writing is one thing and knowledge is another. Writing is the photography of knowledge, but it is not knowledge itself. Knowledge is a light that is in man. It is the legacy of everything the ancestors knew and passed on to us. Jibril Tamsirian, who wrote about the Kurukanfuga Charter and all those things, in his article, Black Man Blamed, made this point. African researchers rehabilitated oral tradition. It is a mine of authentic knowledge. And he cited Hampateba from Mali, Bubu Hamma from Niger as the initiators of this movement. It was taught, cultivated in village schools, because we had our schools before European schools. We had our schools. There are real oral texts. You see, in literature, if we have to explore this term, oral text or spoken hieroglyphs, those are oxymorons. So they seem to contradict each other, a text, oral text, and spoken hieroglyphs. But it is reality. Kathleen Mars from Haiti, in her resonances across the Atlantic, notes that distorted by the victorious and skillfully sprinkled by them with lapses of memory, that it is, if we want to survive, it is vital for Africa and its diaspora to rewrite it and to revisit. It is in this perspective that Cheikh Anta Diop. Cheikh Anta Diop is the reference of all the words about this issue. He is the one also who inspired Asante. Asante visited him in Senegal. And I salute the presence of Yatma Diop, who is a PhD student here at MSU. He is from Senegal, the one who is sitting here. So Anta Diop recommends African specialists must take precautionary measures. It is a question of being able to discover a scientific truth by one's own means without the approval of others. We cannot do that, we are lost. Of knowing how to preserve one's intellectual autonomy until the ideologues who cover themselves with the mantle of science realize that the era of trickery, of intellectual fraud is definitely over. One of the dispositions of the Bukavuga Charter is let everyone educate his or her children, which brings us back to the problem of national education as the foundation of all developments. An education at the service of the people, accessible to them and compatible with their traditional values. We need a truly independent education. I know what I'm speaking about. Education in Francophone countries is not independent. If we take Francophonie, many other instruments, they exist. Those who are from Francophone countries, Jean-Paul, they know what I'm speaking about. So we need a truly independent education so that to emancipate our docile elites out of that assistantship mentality, which is the root cause of their intellectual blindness. And in conclusion, sorry, I exceeded your time. Africana Studies reconnects Africa to its diaspora and brings the diaspora back to Africa from where it was largely banished by many Africanist scholars who see Afrocentricity as a racialized Black space. They are not the same at all. To that effect, Asante reassures Afrocentricity is not the reverse of Eurocentricity, but a particular perspective for analysis which does not seek to occupy all space and time as Eurocentrism has often done. The Afrocentrists argue for pluralism in philosophical views without hierarchy. There is no hierarchy. We never say we are better than others. All cultural centers must be respected. And this is the core essence of Africana Studies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Sangho.
It is a project. It is still ongoing project. It is not finished. So your contributions are welcome.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much. And I'm going to ask people in the room if they have questions first before we go to people online.
I don't have a question, but first of all, thank you for the thoroughness of your work and its comprehensiveness in terms of covering Africa, Caribbean, United States. I see a gap though, which is Latin America. I don't know how you are. The framework is there. I think it's just a question of incorporating places such as Brazil and Suriname, Guyana, that have particular distinct histories from Caribbean or African American. And I think that a fulsome treatment of this subject would include those.
Okay, so yeah, so look if no, it's not here. It's not here. Okay, there is a place where I said that it is here. So you see Afro-Latino studies. It is mentioned because everything that I say, the main theoretical framework upon which this study is built is the concept Africana as viewed by Ashanti. And how it is viewed by Ashanti, this is what is cited here. It is detailed here, African studies, African diaspora, up to the end, and you see Latino is there. Yeah. Maybe I did not explore and offer from this space, but for sure, at the end of this work, I will have Latino American authors also to examine.
Yeah, and of course, you can cover everything. I'm just pointing that out. Just most of your points came from Caribbean and it would be helpful to.
Yeah.
Have some examples or context.
And there is one from Brazil I did not mention. Let us come to the methodology. Methodology. Do Nascimento, Abdias do Nascimento is an author from Brazil. Abdias do Nascimento. He is from Brazil. So he should be explored also in this paper. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Very thorough, and I think it will make a significant contribution in the Francophone countries.
Yeah.
In terms of inclusion of Africana studies, and I think also given the prominence of Bambara culture and elements of Bambara culture in the diaspora, the absence of that, the absence of Francophone countries, which is when Bambara is spoken the most, robs us of inquiry, research in aspects of Bambara culture that we would find in the diaspora in general terms. In other words, I'm saying that if there isn't much research from Francophone countries about the African experience in the Caribbean and in the United States, you are going, and in Latin America, you are going to miss out on some of the commonalities that can be researched and found out that Bambara culture brought to the West. People with a Bambara cultural, historical background and perspective may find cultural continuities of Bambara culture in the Caribbean, in the United States, in Latin America, more so than somebody who comes without that background.
That is true.
There can be a blindness to certain very things that people may take for granted. And I think if you look at some of the research that's been done, and there are people who have been researching the connections between the Gala people of southern Georgia, Sea Island, of Sierra Leone, and the Geechee, and found out that there were connections. And some of those connections were found out in Sierra Leonean pidgin, where, for example, the use of the word una or unu means a group of people, an individual. That was discovered only because there were those that were looking at it from an English perspective. And trace that even to Jamaica. Uno and una refers to people. And that's also in the Georgia Sea Islands, and that's also in the Sierra Leone. So similar connections can go unnoticed. If I'm really focusing on the importance of Bambara as a very widely spoken language and culture in West Africa. If you have no people that have that heavy investment and knowledge and appreciation of that culture, studying the diaspora, there may be things that we are missing out because that perspective is not there. So I think the would increase.
Yes, it
those possibilities.
It would.
I think my second point also has to do with the historical fact that we have to use terms like Francophone countries and Lusophone and Anglophone. Those continue to bind us.
Yeah, it binds.
Some colonial way
it
of
binds.
thinking
It binds. Yes.
And orientation. It's frustrating, but I don't know what we will do about the language here, but it's something that continues to bother me. I don't want to be an Anglophone country. And I don't want my brothers and sisters to be Lusophone or Francophone. They are who they are. They're not somebody's fault.
Yeah, that is true.
So it's a little bit difficult.
It is. So just to add something to your contribution, when we arrived here, I told my wife, we traveled from here to New York by bus, Indian trains. And when we were sitting at the station, many buses came with different names. Tu te rappelles les noms? And those names we have the same names, similarities with Bambara. You see? And I told her, how can it be that where they took those names? Tu te rappelles quelqu'un nom? Bro, pas Kalamazoo, les bus, sur les bus. Les bus avaient des noms. And I asked the driver, he said it is the name of Indian kings, name of Indian kings. And those names sounds like African names. You see? And another thing with Francophone, this is the battle of, what is his name from Kenya? Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who does not want those terms, Francophone, Anglophone, Lusophone. And I wrote it in one of my articles. We are called Francophone countries, but the people who speak French in Mali are not more than 5%. But it is still called Francophone. And even in the administration, people just use French when it is compulsory, when it is necessary. But when they are together, they are not in the formal area. because they feel at that is why Francophone, Anglophone, as you said, it is still a kind of submission to Europe. But if you do not use this term, Francophone, so it cannot be understood. The local of my work also could not be understood.
Yeah, it's point out, it's a falsification.
Yeah.
The same thing that you're saying applies in a place like Zimbabwe. Probably 90% of Zimbabwe. But when in their everyday lives, they're not. So why are they being called Anglophone?
Yeah.
English is not their primary language.
It is not.
So that's I think a problem.
No, it is a problem.
The way we think of ourselves and how we define ourselves. We're not defining ourselves by our own terms.
And when you are talking of Zimbabwe, when Asante visited Zimbabwe, he met the reverse situation in Zimbabwe. What happened to him here? Because when he visited a place of Lebanese or I don't know, Indians, so when they discovered that he was an African American, not an authentic African, so they respected him more. He was black, but not African black, American black, then he deserves more respect. You see? It is a paradox. It is. Okay. Awa, you have the floor.
Anybody else in the room ask the question or comment? Okay, so we can go online. Let's see. So to build on the question that was just asked about connection between Bamana communities and African American communities, some connections from the talk that come to mind are the importance of individual family names and joking relationships. That is in Nankoya in Mali and play cousins in many Black American communities. And I'm sure there are many more connections. So that was a comment from an attendee. My gratitude and thanks to Dr. Sangho and his family. My gratitude and thanks for everyone. I would like to thank Sangho for his gift. I really appreciate the way. Okay, so somebody is enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Doesn't seem to be questions.
So may I ask a question? You have really clearly made a case for this. But when we talk about the practicalities of doing this kind of work, there are issues of research and funding and all these. I don't know how you envisage that. And I don't know what the situation is like in Anglophone countries, in so-called Francophone countries, regarding the support for research for scholars who want to really delve into this in significant and meaningful ways. It's not only that we need these courses taught, or that we need Africana studies programs only. We ultimately have to have very robust research programs, and we need financial support. I don't know, is there any political will in government in Africa for this kind of thing? Is there something that the African Union can do in these areas? I know they're receiving lots of requests and ideas, but it seems to me that issues of African identity, history, culture are really fundamental and foundational for development. And developing outside those concepts will always bring about the kinds of development that don't serve the people. So I believe that our engineers need to be conscious of this kind of thing. Where is Africa coming from? Where are we now? Where are we trying to get to? If we look at things only from the so-called scientific perspective, which ultimately has a very large dose of Eurocentrism, how can our scientists speak to our problems if they are approaching things from a more, Eurocentric position? So I'm thinking that there's a need for a space for a general discussion amongst Africans that has to do with the place of issues of identity in our education system, and then doing research that really supports and encourages African identities and connections with our African diasporic cultures elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. For the practicality, what I intend to do when I return is to organize, because I am not only a lecturer, I am also an administrator. And I used to organize colloquium about issues and how majors are launched at the university. So we have a committee in each university, committee of professors. So that govern once a year, after each academic year, to decide to add disciplines or to take some disciplines that are not very useful. And if during a colloquium, because I intend to organize a colloquium, international colloquium, probably you will be invited, all of you will be invited, and to discuss that issue, to show the usefulness of this research. And after that colloquium, so it would be possible for us to insert Africana studies in the disciplines taught at Université des Lettres. I'm talking for only my university, Université des Lettres et des Sciences. And then how research is financed in Mali. We have FCRIT, Fonds pour le financement de la recherche, FCRIT, and we have higher education. This Fonds pour le financement de la recherche, it is government and United Nations, they finance it. And then there is another one that is pure government. This is called PFF, Programme de Formation des Formateurs. So they finance doctoral students. They also finance lecturers who are in research. Researchers, they also finance them. It depends on your abstract, if you present it and if it is attractive. So you should be able to convince them, and they finance. They finance. And many researchers in Mali, they are here in the United, they are else, but it depends on the ability of the researcher to convince. To convince. Yeah. That is it.
Okay, somebody raised their hand online. So Techno, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Techno? Okay, you can go ahead while we solve this. Go ahead, Leo.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. You're very thorough work that you are doing. And
thank you.
I think very well with some of the we are having here that about engagement with the broader diasporas in the Center for African Studies here at Michigan State. So for me, it's very enlightening and looking at these relationships across the broader African diaspora and kind of looking for ways where you can reunite the African people of African descent in different parts of the world. And then I know Isaac here, we've been having these discussions too, there's some dialogues and speaking with each other to some of the challenges that the scholar Kente, what was the scholar?
Yeah.
Asante,
yeah. Some of the
Molefi Asante.
Yeah, Molefi, that a lot of the issues that he raises, some of that is coming through in our discussions here, in our interpersonal discussion. So it's very timely, and then to be looking at that scholarship. And I know here there's this concept of Ubuntu as well, right?
Yes.
African philosophy, and then we are looking at that here at Michigan State to see how that philosophy can inform maybe the conduct of science and how we can broaden it, not only as a scholarship and teaching, but also to influence, to have broader societal impacts and some of the larger challenges, shared challenges in the world that we are addressing. So maybe there's something to learn from there. And in terms of stepping back a little bit, looking back into our own identities, that Ubuntu really is an important philosophical approach. And I think it comes through with some of the quotations that you have been giving. You could see that, So that's another way that we are looking at it. So I don't know if you have any specific thoughts about Ubuntu and how it fits in your research project, the work that you have been doing.
There is a place for Ubuntu, but I did not get much time. This is a project of 9 months. I am only at the middle. At the middle of the work. It is 50% of the work. And there is a place in my preparation where Ubuntu, can I change this? Yeah. There is a place in my preparation where Ubuntu is mentioned.
While we are waiting, I don't think you will be surprised if the constitution that you refer to has very similar principles to Ubuntu. The very fact that the father teaches the child is an Ubuntu concept. For the Direct Black Africa program, I was sitting there as he was presenting, thinking it would be wonderful if that community had access to this talk. And since it's recorded, it's something that we can pass on because it's really is at the core.
Je peux avoir can I have my screen here? You see, I say this is my preparation MSU. I said Ubuntu has to be a part of the curriculum, offering in a decolonized university. The concept has been interpreted by numerous intellectuals, such as, and I cited some of them. You can see that it is easy to drop softly into the habit of trying to talk about African things by choosing to call them after European things. Shaka becomes the Black Napoleon, Mandela or Martin Luther King, the Black Moses. You see, we have to come out of these things to call other names to our people. We must abandon this notion and assert Africans as themselves in their own rights. So it is in this perspective that I explored Ubuntu here. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, we also want to offer possible solutions. Then how can you implement some of these ideas?
No, as I told, the practicality,
Yes.
To implement it, I intend first to gather intellectuals from Africa, from Europe, from America, from Caribbean, from Latin America. I will send them invitation if they get financing to come, and we will discuss the issue in Mali. And when it is discussed at that colloquium, it will be easier to insert it in the curriculum. This is the way I intend to implement it in my university, because this is my main objective. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
And I think that addresses now.
So Sangho Amadou, you can unmute yourself and talk.
Sangho Amadou is my son.
Okay.
He wants to talk.
Yeah. Seems like he wants to talk. Sangho Amadou, go ahead and unmute yourself. Is he speaking?
He will try.
Hi.
It seems like they are not hearing.
His father and mother, they teach at the English department.
Okay, so while they try to okay, it seems like he's unmuted himself. Amadou, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi,
everybody.
Tell him to.
He is unmuted.
Okay.
Amadou.
Hi. Wait, did you hear me?
So we're gonna come back to him later, probably. So Techno has a question: how to cancel the barriers between Francophone universities and American ones? How to cancel the barriers between Francophone universities and American universities?
No, I don't know how to cancel it, but I will try to contribute to reduce it. Because the objective is not to cancel, but to reduce the gap between Francophone Africa and Anglo America, where English is spoken. And if I launch, as I said, this colloquium, my presence here is also a kind of reduction of this distance with such a topic. We are in touch with African Studies Center here. I am in touch with African Studies Center in Philadelphia. I am in touch with African Studies in Cleveland. I am in touch with African Studies with, I forgot another, where Sheriff is. Sheriff Keita. What is with university? Yeah, you see, so all those are following my presentation. Asante should be following. Asante himself, I am in touch with him. He should be following this presentation. And Ama Mazama, who is the chair of African Studies at Philadelphia University. So all Temple University in Philadelphia. So she is also a reference person helping us to reduce this gap between Francophone Africa and there is a partnership between my university and two universities in Senegal, Cheikh Anta Diop and Gaston Berger, and also with two universities in Côte d'Ivoire, Université Abomey-Calaé, Université Félix Houphouët-Boigny, and the University of Bouaké. And we are also with Benin, Abomey-Calavi. And the impact of this research will have an influence on all my colleagues in those universities. And it will help reduce the distance. But canceling it, this is another thing. So we do not use such terms in research to cancel. It is very authoritative, but we try to reduce the distance.
Abdoulaye Dauda,
Mm-hmm.
you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Abdoulaye is one of my master students in master's program. He is a PhD student.
My greetings to everyone.
Well, I don't know what's happening. There might
Hello.
be an issue.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so
you
Dikaita
hear me?
wants to know what was your motivation to conduct this study?
My motivation, maybe he missed the beginning. I wrote an article about the life of Marie Condé, the history, his history life, who found her roots in Ségou. And I presented this communication in Ouida, Benin, during a colloquium. And there were discussions about that issue because there were scholars from Brazil, from the United States, from Caribbean, from Africa, and people could not, some even scholars, they accused us of selling them. You see, they said they were enslaved because Africa sold them. You see? So all those kind of questions motivated me to delve into the issue. So that motivated me to delve into the issue. You see? Because researchers, there are some events that motivate them. For example, when I was traveling to New York and I found that there are similarities in Indian names with Bambara, that motivated me. Maybe I will come another time in the United States to study the similarities between Indian, Native American, and Africans. You see, that is the way motivation arises.
My greetings to you.
I see Abdoulaye Dauda here.
Abdoulaye?
Yeah, my greeting to everyone. Can you hear me?
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, Abdoulaye.
Yeah, okay, my greeting to everyone.
Yeah.
And all my congratulations to Dr. Sangho for the presentation.
Thank you.
It was a very good presentation. And also a lesson for me today, because I learned a lot. And also, what I want to tell is that through this topic, so we know the importance of connecting, as the title of the topic is, to connect Africa to its diaspora. Because when you know where you come from, it's very easy for you to go where you want to go. And our minds are colonized. Our minds are so much colonized with such kind of topics. So it will be very easy for us to decolonize our minds. For that reason, I thank a lot Dr. Sangho for the research, and I also encourage him to make further research about the topic, and I'm looking forward to the implementation of this in our curriculum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kindu. Thank you for your contribution.
My gratitude and thanks go to Dr. Sangho and Mr. Bibi Keita, one of Dr. Sangho's students. I really appreciate the way he has done his presentation. I think that through these programs, we will do many things together, and this will be an opportunity for many comprendors, mainly the Europeanized African, to be aware about the real story of Africa. And this also, Africana studies will sensitize the comprendor and also the bad leaders in Africa to be proud to be an African. So I think that also this program will promote African identity. These programs will promote African culture, and it will also promote African languages. I think that he is going to do his best so that we can implement this program in our university in Mali. So I really appreciate his presentation, and my gratitude and thanks go to our two for her brief presentation to our one of best teacher, who is Dr. Ousmane Sangho. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your compliments, Bibi Keita, and your contribution.
I would like to ask a question to Dr. Sangho. Since he mentioned that our universities, particularly Francophone universities, are European in terms of contents. So I would like to know what should be done in order to decolonize our African universities.
Thank you, Mohamed Jara. So I will repeat the same thing I have just said. Somebody said how to cancel, but here we will not, our intention is not to decolonize, but it is toward the decolonization of minds. We try to motivate people. We teach, we deconstruct Eurocentrist ideas to our students. We teach them the values of our oral tradition, of African empires, of everything, so that they can be proud of themselves. This is the role of a teacher. Now, if this helps the student to be decolonized, so it means that our objective is reached. That is all. Thank you very much for your question.
Okay, and we are out of time. I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Sangho, and all the participants from Mali and from all over the world who participated. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you next Thursday. Bye, everybody.